What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So now that we are around 30 games into the NHL season, I think that there are certain hard truths that every single NHL fan should just accept at this point. I know that some of you guys are probably going to push back against this, but I think that these are some things that maybe have been brewing the last season or so. But based on what we have seen to start this season, it has been, my suspicions have been confirmed. And at this point, I think that this should kind of be a consensus opinion among NHL fans. So we got 8 of these. We're just going to get right into it. We're not going to waste any time. And up first, Cale Makar is no longer the consensus, no doubt, without a doubt, best defenseman in the entire NHL. Obviously, I'm more so referring to Quinn Hughes with that graphic that I showed than in Adam Fox. But yeah, I think when looking at Cale Makar, you could still have him as your number one. But to act like the notion that Quinn Hughes is not in the same conversation as Cale Makar, like maybe we said at the halfway point, third way point of last season, I think you're just reminiscing too much on the 2022 season. And don't get me wrong, Cale Makar, that was one of the greatest defenseman seasons of the modern era. But when you look at it, Quinn Hughes just has been the best defenseman the last year and a half. And Adam Fox, when he doesn't have to play with the corpse of Ryan Lindgren, I think is maybe in the same tier as a Cale Makar. Not saying he's better than Cale Makar, but I think at this point, it's debatable. It is definitely debatable in terms of who the best defenseman in the entire NHL. I'm not sure yet who I'm going to have in my updated top 50 players in the entire NHL, but it's definitely a 1A, 1B between Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar, and I still think Adam Fox is definitely the consensus third best, maybe even potentially in that discussion. But yeah, that's a hard truth. I get Colorado fans riding for their guys, but I think any casual fan that still acts like Cale Makar is leaps and shoulders above a guy like Quinn Hughes, it looks like he's on pace to potentially win his second Norris, or at least in my book, be yet again the best defenseman in the entire NHL. And he played pretty good in the playoffs. Maybe not as good as Cale Makar last year, but still showed up in a big way. It is definitely some kind of debate for who the best defenseman is in the entire NHL. Next up, Andrei Svechnikov's career has been disappointing when looking at him relative to since his second season in the entire NHL. I got to preference it by that because, of course, he's a second overall pick. He has been around the 70-point guy throughout his career. That's not disappointing. That is not what I'm fully referencing. But when looking at him since his second season in the NHL, it has kind of been disappointing. His second season, he had 24 goals, 37 assists, 61 points in 68 games before the COVID shutdown. That is great. We thought that at 19 years old, this guy was going to be a franchise superstar, top 20, top 15 player in the entire NHL. Guess what he has right now? Right now, he has 11 goals, 13 assists, 24 points in 29 games, on pace for 31 goals, 37 assists, 68 points. And by the way, the pace when the 2019-2020 season was 29 goals, 44 assists, 73 points. And even the 4 seasons in between his second season and this most recent season, he put up around 28 goals, 42 assists, 70-point pace. He has basically been the same player since he was 19. Since that second season, he has not taken those leaps that we expected. And yes, you can maybe say he'd score more in a Rod Brind'Amour system, but I am just talking about, I can't really buy that considering at 19 years old, he was that productive and he has not progressed. Still a very, very good elite first liner. I am not trying to say that he is some bust by any stretch at second overall, but when looking at it, we really thought that we had one of the best wingers in the entire NHL with the guy like Andrei Svechnikov, and now someone in his own draft class that was taken 2 picks later in Brady Tkachuk has just straight up cleared him. You look at Brady Tkachuk earlier in his career, he was first couple seasons only like 40, 45, then like 55-ish point pace his first 3 years. There was no discussion after 2020 who was the better player, who had the brighter future. It was obviously Andrei Svechnikov. So from that perspective, Svechnikov has just not turned into the player that we have thought. And again, still a very good player, but he has been a little bit disappointing, and I think us as fans kind of have to admit that, especially when a guy like Martin Necas, you talk about the Rod Brind'Amour system, Martin Necas looks like he is taking that next step. I'm not saying he's going to be a consistent 110-point pace guy, but yeah, pretty concerning if you're a Carolina Hurricanes fan. You were banking on this guy being a franchise. You thought he was going to be the better between him and Spashinaho. That is obviously not the case. Spashinaho has to be the franchise guy, and as a result, that might lead him not turning into that true superstar, might lead to the Carolina Hurricanes never making a Stanley Cup final or end up winning a Stanley Cup final. Next up, John Tortorella being the coach of the Philadelphia Flyers right now is ruining their rebuild. Hear me out, because I'm actually complimenting Tortorella with this, but the overall long-term success of the Philadelphia Flyers, I'm concerned because he has elevated a pretty below average talent group kind of bad talent group, if we're going to be honest, the last 2 seasons, but he has elevated them to being only the 12th worst team in the entire NHL. This year, they're battling for a playoff spot. Yet again, I don't think that they're going to make the playoffs, but I think that they're going to just barely miss by like 4 to 5 points. And as a result, I am massively concerned how this team is building. Yes, I know that they have Colorado and Edmonton's first round picks this year, as well as Anaheim's second round pick. So they're going to have some picks, but those picks are not going to be top 20 from Edmonton and Colorado. There's a good chance one is between 29 to 32. One of those teams make the Western Conference Finals, maybe even both of those teams. Those are not the kind of picks that end up getting you out of rebuilds in terms of getting true franchise superstar players. Their own pick, yet again, is looking like it's going to be between 11 through 15. I'm not sure the confidence of this rebuild when it's Matvei Michkov. Again, Matvei Michkov's a superstar. Don't get me wrong. Matvei Michkov, Jet Luchenko, and then you select like Logan Hensler, 14th overall. I'm concerned for the long term of the Philadelphia Flyers. Again, Tortorella is a very good coach, and he's doing his job. He's winning games. He is a very good coach, but he has definitely elevated this to the point where you look at some of the other young teams that are up and coming. They have multiple cornerstone franchise pieces that are progressing well. Matvei Michkov, Jet Luchenko. I like guys like Bobby Brink, Tyson Forrester, some of their young guys, but they're not really high impact guys. Jamie Drysdale, not looking like anything at this point. And it's unfair because although Cutter Gauthier also isn't looking good, that was supposed to be more so Matvei Michkov's running mate. That's unfortunate that he wanted out. He said all the right things in the draft process, and after getting drafted, that sucks. But yeah, right now, Tortorella being so goddamn good is kind of hurting their rebuild. Next up, the New York Rangers are fully carried by their goaltending and not true contenders. Don't have a chance at going on a Stanley Cup run unless we get genuinely like a generational run for Igor Shesterkin. When looking at them in prior seasons, their 5-on-5 play was always pretty concerning. Last year, they were 12th in the entire NHL in 5-on-5 expected goals percentage. It was really just the special teams and, of course, Igor Shesterkin showing up in a big way in the playoffs. The underlying numbers and just the overall 5-on-5 numbers were always very concerning for this team. So when you have guys like Trocheck, Zibanejad, Kreider in their early 30s start to regress, on top of the fact that Miller just never took that next step, and Ryan Lindgren has been battling injuries and he just hasn't been the same player. He's been straight up trash, dragging Adam Fox down. As a result, this Rangers team just isn't that good in the Eastern Conference. They don't match well against a lot of teams in the Eastern Conference, and their special teams aren't nearly as good as compared to prior years. I guess Igor, but even Igor last year had a .926, and they still just got stonewalled. They got dummied in the final 4 or 5 games against Florida. Once they meet a team that actually has solid goaltending as well and can just bully them at 5-on-5, they really don't stand a chance. And I don't think that they can do anything mid-season, even with that Jacob Trouba money probably, to change that. So as a result, they are definitely contenders. Right now, the 2023 draft is looking more like the 2016 draft than the 2015 draft, which we initially thought it was resembling. Still a very good draft. I'm not saying that Connor Bedard's not going to turn into a high-level player, Fantilli, Carlson, or bust by any stretch, but these guys are all having kind of sophomore slumps. Michkov's been great. Will Smith has been a little bit shaky. He's been playing better offensively late, but he still has 11 points in 25 games and has been pretty brutal defensively. You look at the defensemen in this draft, ASP's progressing well, but outside of that, there's really no other stud defenseman in terms of just developing. Reinbacher just shredded his knee yet again, losing a full year of development. Simashev could be a very good defenseman at the NHL level, but has still not shown really anything in the KHL offensively to think that he's going to be a future top 30, top 40 defenseman in the entire NHL, complete two-way guy, as well as Tom Willander looks like he can be a very solid second pair guy, and that's all the Canucks need him to be, but I would not bet on him being some kind of star. When looking at some of the forwards, you got guys like Leonard Perreault, Oliver Moore, Easton Cowan, Kobe Barlow, Jaeger, all kind of stalling relative to their production last year. Last year, when they were very, very productive, has kind of regressed or just stayed the same. You do have guys like Dvorsky, Crystal, Matthew Wood, Daniil Boot, and David Enstrom progressing well, but those guys are more lower kind of prospects. Maybe not Dvorsky, but you never really banked on those guys being stars. I still think it's a very good draft. Obviously, it's better than 2022, better than 2021, but I'm not sure that we have a 2015 on our hands when we have 5 or 6 future Hall of Famers, another 9 to 10 all-star level players. I think we got to pump the brakes, and it's definitely looking more so like a 2016, which was still absolutely loaded. I'm not trying to say, again, that these guys are cooked. That is still a damn good draft to be compared to. Next up, not being loyal to your veteran players. It usually is the right call. Obviously, the two guys pictured, Jonathan Marchessault, Vegas doesn't want to give him some kind of long-term deal. They move on. They decide we're good with Barbashev. Pavel Dorofeyev needs more minutes. They're first in the Pacific Division right now. Marchessault struggling a little bit in Nashville and still has 3 years left at a decent cap hit. In the Tampa Bay Lightning, they told Stamkos, their captain, their GOAT. Marchessault was their greatest player of all time before he left. Same thing with Stamkos. They told him, we'll give you like an 8-year deal at like $3 to $4 million. You can retire a Lightning, but you're not getting paid a lot. He decides to go out, test the market. He has like 4 even strength points at this point. He has not been good for the Nashville Predators. Instead of giving Stamkos what he wanted, $7 to $8 million, they decide, screw it. We're going to go trade for Jake Gensel. Now, as a result, their window is kind of reopened, or at least definitely extended in terms of being a solid playoff team. Right now, they're on pace for like around 100, 102 points safely in a playoff spot. Great moves by them. Also, when Vegas dumped Marc-Andre Fleury, he had $7 million. He was coming off a Vezina win. They traded him. They caught a bunch of flack. Fleury kind of fell off the next season. And although Vegas didn't make the playoffs the following season, they would go on to win the Stanley Cup with a cheaper goalie tandem, obviously. So, yeah. So I know fans hate to see longtime legends in a certain place get traded. Also, Chicago traded Patrick Kane, ended up winning the draft lottery to get Connor Bedard. But yeah, sometimes it's the right call. When you're faced with an alternative of give some overpay long-term deal to a veteran that has done so much for your team, or move off him, get someone younger, get creative in a Tampa Bay, you do that. I'm sorry. Those guys are legends. Stamkos, they're gonna mend their differences. He's gonna get his jersey retired, no doubt. Be an all-time Tampa Bay Lightning. I think Marchessault actually might get screwed in terms of the jersey retirement if that core stays together for another 5 to 6 years. But still, time heals all wounds. They're going to be perfectly fine. But in the now, those teams are better off because they kind of told their older guys to kick rocks in a way. Next up, Landeskog will either never return, and if he does, he'll probably be a shell of himself, not close to $7 million. Whenever I talk about the Colorado Avalanche, people go, but Landeskog, he's returning soon. That's going to be a massive ad. I don't know if he's ever going to return. I hate to say it. It has been since 2022. And you look at a guy, first off, he had knee cartilage transplant surgery. I feel like a lot of people don't know what that means. He was basically out of cartilage in his knee. He had destroyed all the cartilage in his knee. Cartilage is obviously massive for movement and just overall day-to-day having no pain in your knees. So he got knee transplant cartilage surgery, massive surgery. For comparison, Lonzo Ball got that in like the winter of 2022. He now just returned to the NBA. He's a shell of himself, and he got it when he was 24 or 25 years old. He's 27 right now. You look at Landeskog, he's 32 years old. Mark Mathot also had this surgery done. Granted, he had it done when he was like 32 or 33, and he was not as good of a player right now as Landeskog was when he had it. So he obviously, like when his skill level dropped off as a result of it, he wasn't close to NHL level. So Landeskog, he might return, but it might honestly not be that good for the Colorado Avalanche, considering the fact that he is under contract at $7 million. I would be shocked if he's even a $5 million player. I know he's here. I know he's their captain, but people just got to realize that he's definitely not going to return himself, probably a shell of himself, and probably going to be an overpaid captain at that point. I wouldn't be shocked if he never returns. He says that he can live day to day perfectly pain-free. That's really all that matters at the end of the day, that he can play with his kids, live a normal life. Hockey is an added bonus. So I'm just a little bit uncertain on the Gabriel Landeskog, and I feel like fans got to stop bringing it up because honestly, it might just not happen at this point, or it might just be an unfortunate situation where he goes out there and he's not nearly the same again. To play hockey at the highest level, to go through a surgery like that, it's tough, man. It's really, really tough. And then lastly, the Ottawa Senators rebuild is over. You just got to face this hard truth. This is obviously a little bit of a troll run. They could potentially still miss the playoffs. Honestly, it's probably like 50-50 at this point if the Rangers keep on playing like shit, maybe a little bit higher. But Linus Ullmark, rough start to his Senators career. He went 4-7-1, 881. Since then, 6-0-1 with a 950. Obviously, they're not going to get that level of goaltending continued, but if this team can just get average to above average, and definitely if they get good goaltending the rest of the way, I think they're probably going to beat out a New York Rangers to end up making the playoffs. Maybe they could even surpass a Boston Bruins or a Tampa Bay Lightning. This team's underlying numbers are very strong at 5-on-5, and even defensively, they've been very good. It really is going to come down to the goaltending. I believe in that top six to put up a bunch of goals. Josh Norris, I got to shout out him. I thought he was trending towards being one of the worst contracts in the entire NHL. He's probably not worth $8 million, but he's a solid like $6 to $7 million second line center. He's been very impressive. As a result, the Ottawa rebuild is coming to an end. So to wrap it up, Makar is no longer the consensus, no doubt, without a doubt, number one defenseman. Quinn Hughes has definitely entered the conversation. It is a 1A, 1B in either direction. Next up, Svechnikov. It's been a little bit of a disappointment since the 2019-2020 season. Tortorella, very good coach, but in the long-term picture, the Philadelphia Flyers, he might be hurting it more so than helping. New York Rangers, they're frauds right now. Until they do mass changes to improve their overall team outside of the goaltender, it's just going to continue to be 5-on-5 a disaster. The 2023 draft is closer to the 2016 and trending towards being the 2016 draft versus the 2015 draft that is one of the greatest of all time. Don't be loyal to your veterans, or being loyal to your veteran. Not being loyal to your veterans is sometimes the best chance. Gabriel Landeskog is not going to be the same player if he returns at all. And then the Ottawa Senators rebuild is over. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about these hard truths? What are some other hard truths that you would drop below? Let me know in the comments, what do you think? I'll be seeing you in the next one.